And then there's the land use, growth management, and environment goal. That goal is to promote sustainable and environmentally sound land development patterns in a village setting that complements the character of the town. As I mentioned before, we looked at the existing land use when we were looking at the background information, and we also looked at existing zoning and development patterns. This is a future land use map. Keep in mind that these are not zoning districts, but these are land use categories. So when you look at the yellow areas, those are the areas that are considered club residential, which is already fairly established, and that's actually the name of the zoning district in that particular case. The darker green areas are open space and recreation. So there you see the golf courses and sort of some of the community lakes there at Kenderton Village and things like that. And also the soccer complex. Those are considered open space and recreation. The orange areas are mixed use centers, and we consider those like where we are here in Kenderton, as well as the future town center area, which is sort of triangular area down there between 158 and 801, that orange area. That's the town center. And then of course there's potential future mixed use center there above River Hill Commons that's shown. The red area is considered commercial center, and that includes some of the more highway-oriented development, which we're calling village commercial there at the intersection of 158 and 801. There's the low shopping center area that's shown as commercial center, as well as the future hospital development, which is the larger red area called River Hill Commons. Now, the brown area is considered village residential, which includes Kenderton Village, and there's also some potential future village residential there next to the hospital site. Then the purple, of course, is the transitional growth area. This is an area that as you move away from town has potential for a mixture of different types of these uses depending upon the situation. But that was the future land use map that would guide any future zoning decisions and development decisions down the road. A couple of other sample strategies. The top one deals more with growth management, and the bottom deals more with environment. We wanted some examples of each. But the top one says, work with Davie County and or Forsyth County to provide infrastructure for new commercial and residential development that includes a variety of housing types to support existing and proposed commercial development and to accommodate the additional workforce for new employment centers in the area. So it's very important to follow that strategy in order to make sure that there are utilities and schools in place that support sound growth management in the future. The bottom one, incorporate more detailed low-impact development guidelines into the zoning ordinance as an option for stormwater management. These are leaving for options things like rain gardens and permeable parking lots to help reduce runoff and use that as an option for stormwater management. Now at this point, the town center is a part of our land use growth management and environment goal. And that's because the town center is a part of that land use. As I mentioned before, back in 2005, when the zoning ordinance was adopted, there was the area to the southwest corner of 158 and 801 that was sort of set aside as an area that would be the town center. As many of you know, other towns might have a more historic town center that they grew up around. Bermuda Run's a little different because of when it incorporated and how it grew, so it doesn't have exactly a town center to grow around. So in 2005, they decided that that was an important thing, and that sort of has progressed until today, to have that sort of town center, to have town gatherings and have that center of activity to sort of boost the town's identity. So that area has remained throughout this plan the area to focus on for town center. The strategy for that is to encourage the development of a town center following a concept for development and strategically investing in the infrastructure to support it. And along with Miller Landscape Architecture and Fuller Architecture, we worked on doing a sort of town center concept. And I would love to have Scott Miller come up here at this time and sort of walk through that with you. Just as a summary of the concepts, there's a mix of retail, office, and civic residential uses, a central open space, a central amphitheater, attractive water features, distinct roundabout entrances, an outdoor pedestrian mall with a cafe atmosphere, and a 3-story building mass. But I'm going to let Scott talk to you about all of the good stuff Scott talks about when he talks about the plan so much better than I do.
Thank you, Erin. Good evening, everybody. When I was heading over here this evening on my way out the door, my mom asked where I was going, and I told her I was going to talk to some folks over in Bermuda Run, citizens of Bermuda Run. And she said, "Oh gosh, that must be nerve-wracking." And I said, "Mom, this is exciting." I said, "This is a wonderful thing to be doing." I'm very excited to be here. Like Erin said, I'm Scott Miller with MLA. And we are very excited about being here. We're very excited about being able to help with the vision of your community. 12 years old is infancy, and you have a wonderful opportunity here to take control of your destiny. And as Mayor Ken, as I like to refer to him because I can never say his last name very well, as he was talking about, he talked a lot about vision. Erin has talked about vision, and that's really where we are at this point in time. Nothing that you see here is set in stone. When we had these meetings over the past year to get public input, everybody has their own ideas and their own thoughts and their own experiences and where they've come from as to what their community should be. And the real challenge and effort is to take what's in each of your minds in terms of what's important to you and get that out in front of everybody so that as we move forward in time, we can begin to create a vision that everybody can buy into and everybody has a piece of. And so what you see in front of you here is just an effort. It's just an opportunity to get something from here to paper so that people can react to it. And we do that in a number of different ways. We do that through words, we do that through maps and drawings, we do that through visualization of models and things that John will talk about in a few minutes. But in this particular case, we had the unique opportunity to take a piece of property. The area that's designated for town center right now was zoned a number of years ago for town center. It was 120 acres plus or minus. And what we did, we understand that this is people's land. You know, this is people's businesses. These areas are sacred to a lot of people. They've been in their families for a long time. But it's also a really great thing that the town has focused in on one area and said, listen, if we're going to make this happen at some point in time, unless we just let it happen by itself, and you know what you get when you just let things happen, that we have a wonderful opportunity to grow the way we want to grow. And so all we did in this exercise, and like we said, nothing is set in stone. Nothing you see on these plans cannot be changed. It's all about your input and your comments that hopefully we'll hear tonight as we move forward. So just to explain this map just a little bit, what we have here is we have an area, and we just took about 80 acres of the 120 acres. And basically what you see at the top is the intersection of 158 and 801. And we all know that there's a good bit of traffic congestion at that location. There's commercial development built right up to the streets. And we didn't let anything stand in our way when we were visioning, okay? We're just visioning, okay? We're talking about these ideas. But one of the things that we recognized and got out of the input was that there was a lot of traffic congestion. So the idea of doing a boulevard loop road that actually bypassed that intersection, so anybody coming up 158 or coming up 801 that wanted to get on the other road could possibly do it through a a parkway, what we're calling Bermuda Run Parkway, that loops around and creates basically an area for the town center, okay? So if you were heading north on 801, there's a roundabout there at the entrance gate to Bermuda Run, okay? You could get off that roundabout, get on the Bermuda Run Parkway, cut across, and get over to 158, or conversely from 158 over to 801. So that created an area in the central. Also, the other thing was, we understand the importance for people to be able to see the village center. Although this property is inward facing, it drops towards the center of the property. And so one of the things that we also did was try to create an entryway into the town center. So the town center, the mass of the town center would be located in the central portion of this basically triangular piece of property. And we would create a new entrance, say, up at 158 with a new roundabout at 158 and 801 there, that would then draw you in to the core of the town center, towards the center part of the development. There would be other development around that, basically sub-development areas. It might be, you know, it could be anything from municipal buildings, post offices, town hall, governmental buildings, those kinds of things. There's a central drainage way that runs through from, you can see the lake at the bottom and the lake on the other side. Those are natural low areas. Actually, one of them's a lake already, one of them's a pond, but they could be expanded for stormwater control and runoff, okay? So we're talking about going back and making it a green or a environmentally sensitive area. Those would be utilized for that. But there'd be the central low area that some of the mass of the buildings in the town center would be developed around and create kind of this cafe kind of atmosphere on the interior where a lot of pedestrian kind of efforts and that kind of thing could go on. And then of course there are other items. And once again, you can just let your mind wander, but there could be office space above retail. There could be apartment uses. There could be YMCA type uses, bookstores, internet cafes, all of that kind of stuff could happen within that. And once again, this is just a vision, and when you visit the tables, especially that table I think back on the right-hand back corner back here, we can talk more about the specific uses. You can give us your ideas and thoughts, but that's generally what we were going after. So Aaron, I probably used up way more than my time. Thank you for your attention, and appreciate and look forward to working with you, continue to work with you. Thank you.
And now I just ask that John Fuller briefly sort of describe the design concepts for the buildings within the town center.
Hello, it's very nice to be here with you tonight. My name is John Fuller. I'm representing Fuller Architecture, and we were fortunate to work with Benchmark and NLA on this project. And we had done some work back in 2005 with some visioning of this piece of property. Scott with Miller Landscape Architecture has added a really creative streak to the layout of what we're looking at here. And we were so enthralled when we saw this that we took a stab at looking at some of the interior components of this and how architecturally it might work. In the initial public input sessions that were held, the 3 different sessions, and then other data that was provided in that input, there was a lot of information provided by the public about materials, the feel and look of the town center facility area, and some of the things that came out of that are a village type of setting. Also materials, more lasting materials that are similar to some of the materials that are around here historically or other, such as stone, brick, stucco, and wood siding, that kind of thing. So we gathered those kinds of materials to think about the areas. I'm going to step away for just a second. Some of the areas that we were looking at are right in here. So these 2 images that you see are from the core of the town center district. And you can see the upper image, you can see the round kind of turret type of atmosphere that has been gleaned from some of the facilities, the historic facilities in the Bermuda Run area. as well as the materials. The lower images of an amphitheater kind of area. Scott mentioned about the drainage areas and natural areas in the center of the complex, and that could be an area that's an amphitheater, taking advantage of the natural terrain and creating a really nice public kind of space in the center of this area. So that's kind of the picture that we were trying to paint, gleaning that information from the input sessions. And, it's been really exciting, and I look forward to seeing the development of the town in the many years to come. Thank you very much.
And many of the design aspects that John mentioned were something that in the plan we emphasized that that's something, a design language that should be used throughout the town in many different ways so that the town's tied together cohesively, and you're not just seeing the town center looks that way and this area looks that way. It's more of a cohesiveness. So that was a really important exercise. Obviously, land use and growth management was our largest goal category and had the most information in it. But now we'll move on to transportation. The goal is to establish a safe and efficient multimodal transportation network that accommodates the demand from proposed land uses. Some of the sample strategies for this include to budget funds annually to complete priority sidewalk segments that will connect the residential and commercial areas of town. You'll see that on the map that I show on the next slide. And then work with NCDOT to replace the Burt's Way Bridge, which is just back here in the backyard of the barn, for pedestrian, bicycle, and golf cart use after the proposed widening of I-40. NCDOT's plans originally involved the removal of the Burt's Way Bridge without replacing it, and we have recommended to them that they replace the bridge for those uses because it's an important part of connecting the town, both sides with Kendrington Village and then over here. So that's an example rendering of what the bridge could look like as a pedestrian bridge. And of course, this is the future pedestrian network. You see those yellow lines. Those would be the areas, the sidewalk segments that would be completed over a very long period of time, but they are numbered based on the priorities of the rankings of folks who participated in the initial public input process. So if you want to look at that map in more detail, it'd be good to visit the transportation table, but it does include segments along Bermuda Run Drive, Riverbend, 158, and different portions of 801 over time. Another sample strategy is to work with the Metropolitan Planning Organization and NCDOT to reconfigure the U.S. Highway 158 Bermuda Run Drive and Twinsway intersection. This is another example of the plan helping us before it was actually adopted, because the town has worked with Ramey Kemp and Associates and the MPO to do this preliminary engineering study to see if a roundabout would work at that intersection. The recommendation to the Technical Advisory Committee for the MPO is moving forward to try to move forward with this particular plan. Of course, this is a proposed road improvements map where you see the yellow lines would be new roads or connections. Some of them would be through developer initiation. As far as development occurs, the developer would put in that road, and one of those connections would involve the town being involved in that. The circles indicate intersection improvements, potentially roundabouts. Several folks that were involved in the public input process initially mentioned how the roundabouts would be a good way to enter into the town, to slow down, to know that you're entering the town. As a traffic calming measure and as a way to keep traffic moving instead of getting backed up at different intersections. So that's sort of what we've proposed there in the proposed road improvements. As far as the services and infrastructure goal, provide for adequate services and infrastructure to sustain and improve existing development and to promote economic development of the town in the future. This would include pursuing additional sewer capacity through agreements with adjacent jurisdictions or by constructing a new sewer treatment plant. Sewer capacity is very important to the future development of the town, and without it, growth would likely stagnate. Work with local utility providers to bury utility lines to improve corridor aesthetics and reliability of utility service in inclement weather. We all know that it's much more attractive to have utility lines buried, but it also has a practical merit in the fact that outages occur less frequently. But this is a rendering of what 801 there at the McDonald's might look like if some building improvements took place there, some landscaping improvements, as well as burying of the utility lines. And the final goal, which is the Parks and Recreation goal, is to make use of attractive recreation facilities that provide a variety of activities for all residents of the town of Bermuda Run. And this is in sort of a three-step approach to Parks and Recreation for Bermuda Run. This is the Parks and Recreation map. Anything there in green is the open space and recreation area. Of course, you'll see that the largest area on this map is actually not in the jurisdiction of Bermuda Run, but is right next to it, and that is Tanglewood Park, just across the river. It is a very large and useful Parks and Rec amenity that you all should be able to take advantage of because it is so close and it is a wonderful asset to have. So the first sample strategy is to promote Tanglewood Park as the primary recreation facility for the area and accommodate its use. And this is an initial step, just to make people aware of it, let them know it's there, make it easier for them to get to with sidewalks over the bridge and bike lanes over the bridge to actually get to Tanglewood Park to make use of it. And I don't know if all of you have seen it, but there was a Yadkin River Greenway feasibility study that was done last year by Susan Hatchell Landscape Architecture. And that plan involves having a greenway sort of along where the soccer park area is and coming into town, that's staying up basically on this side of the river. And also connecting the different pedestrian amenities in the town to that greenway and interconnecting the town in that way. So that strategy would be to work with the Metropolitan Planning Organization and NCDOT to construct the greenway and related pedestrian connections as shown on the phased Yadkin River Greenway Plan. And then over time, eventually, when there is enough demand that is generated from new residential development, implement a phased plan to develop a riverfront park. And that would be the property that is to the south of the soccer park here adjacent to 158 and the river, sort of tying that greenway into a future town park that would be specifically for the town that might have slightly different amenities than Tanglewood or closer things that the demand would be generated for, particularly for Bermuda Run. But that would be down the road in the future once that demand had been generated. And then finally, many of you may ask, well, how do we implement all this? This is a lot to cover, a lot to know how to do. What do we do first? What do we do last? What do we do in the middle? Who's responsible for it? Well, that's why in this plan we do have an implementation matrix. And in this matrix, each strategy that's in the plan is listed. And each of those strategies is prioritized based on immediate need, based on the public input that we received. Also listed are resources. The resources are, in general terms, things that cost less than $1,000 or things that might cost between $1,000 and $10,000 or things that cost greater than $10,000. Now, in the resources category, that money doesn't necessarily all come from the town. It might be resources like grants. It might be a county responsibility depending on if it's utilities or things like that. There might be situations where there can be a partnership, or perhaps the strategy can actually be implemented by a private developer. It just depends. But the resources required for it vary depending on what strategy it is. The time frame is not its priority, but how long it takes. So something might be high priority, but it might be long term because it takes a long time to achieve, maybe greater than 5 years. So that's what the time frame describes. And then the responsible parties, who needs to be involved in that strategy and making it happen. In some cases, it might involve the planning board. In some cases, it might involve the town council. In some cases, it involves Davie Utilities or the Winston-Salem Metropolitan Planning Organization. So the responsible parties are also listed in that implementation matrix, so that every year, annually, when the town council is figuring out the budget for the next year, they can look back at the plan and sort of know what to be working on next. Now, some of these strategies could increase in priority or decrease in priority based on the available funding at the time or based on changes in need over time. But this is a good starting place, and it's a good checklist for the town to work with in the future. So that's the implementation part of the plan and how that gets done. Now, at this point, this is where I was talking about the logistics earlier, given the number of people in this room. We do have 5 tables at the back, and those tables have more detail about the strategies for each goal. Of course, there's over on this side of the room, there's the services, infrastructure, and then the transportation table. And on this side, there's the land use, parks and recreation, and then community identity table. Now, a couple things. If you have had a chance to look at the plan online, that's great. We'd love to hear what you think about it. If you would like to stay with us this evening and look at the tables and give us feedback that way, that's great. If you would like to go home and get ready for the State of the Union address, like some people mentioned to me earlier, you're welcome to do that. And you can actually submit your comments through the project website. You can also email, and there's the email address that you can email your comments to. But as far as the comments this evening, like I said, if you'd like to go to the different tables, there are little comment sheets that you can write your comments on once you've had a chance to look at that particular goal in more detail. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stay up here at the front of the room for a little bit, and that way anybody that wants to come up here and talk to me about specific questions before they go to the tables, they're welcome to do that. There are some refreshments in the back corner if you'd like those. And oh, one other thing, that my name tag keeps falling off. But the people with the red name tags are consultants here that are happy to answer your questions. That includes folks from Benchmark, Miller Landscape Architecture, and Fuller Architecture. The people with the gold name tags are people who are on the planning board, and they will also be happy to answer your questions. So if you find anybody in a red or gold name tag, feel free to ask them questions about the plan, and we will be here for probably about another hour so that you can go through that process. And we again thank you so much for coming. This is a wonderful turnout. We're very excited that you're here, and we think this is a great plan, and we look forward to working with Bermuda Run in the future. Thank you so much.